This afternoon, I have with me a panel of diverse and expert opinions that will be very happy to share them with you. So without further ado, I will let them introduce themselves to you. We'll start first for Chandras, for Bankai Group. Please, sir.
Hello. Yeah, thank you, Nasia. I'm Chandrahas Rana. I'm representing here Bankai Group, and I head the business development globally for the Bankai Group. And we at Bankai Group is one of the leading carrier when it comes to international voice messaging, as well as specific to telecom technology space. We are into revenue assurance, fraud management, and other stuff. So it's my pleasure to be the part of this experience panel. I look forward to have the insights from all the panelists. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yasser Wahid from Telesign.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Nasia. I represent Telesign. I'm based out of Miami, but it's been fantastic weather here in DC so far. Thanks for joining. Hopefully, we can at least shed some light on what we can help with and understand some of the complexities around messaging.
Okay, and I now want to see if you guys notice the swap on the pictures and the names. So I'm going to go all the way to Chuck Parrish from Tomia in the end, who's sitting under his picture.
All right, hello. My name is Chuck Parrish. I am the SVP and General Manager of Tomia's Interconnect product line, and previously known as Telecoms. Great honor to be here on the platform with all the esteemed colleagues here, and really having a great ITW.
We're going to continue with Nora Fako. Please introduce yourself, sir.
Hi. Take this one. Okay. Hello. My name is Noah Rafelko. I own a company named TSG Global. We're one of the first companies to deploy blockchain identity to service telecommunications entities. So hopefully we can give you a little insight as to how we all view messaging, because we all use it every day, and we certainly suggest it to others and businesses and support it ourselves. So welcome.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Noah. And last but not least, our friend Tim Ward from XConnect.
I'm so tempted to introduce myself as Chuck Parrish, but anyway, let's stick with Tim Ward. So Tim Ward from XConnect. XConnect is a company that acts as an information provider. We're mainly providing information about numbers, number portability, number range, validation, routing information, providing the attributes of a number to kind of the ecosystem that is involved here. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of Somos, who run a number of the regulated databases here in the US. So whilst XConnect is kind of the international side of that business, Somos are very much focused on the US marketplace and providing that same kind of support.
Fantastic. Thank you. So to kick it off, I want to get straight to the juice. And that is, what do you think is the #1 challenge when it comes to commercial models for the messaging community? And I'm going to stay with you, Tim.
Okay. Well, we have a kind of a very, I don't know, it's almost like a rifle shot focus on this, in that, you know, the kind of business we have is in providing information to help people make decisions. And a lot of those decisions are cost-based or price-based. So, you know, one of the biggest issues that I think this marketplace is facing is this bringing together voice and messaging, where you've got a business model in voice where you get charged when you make a call, when it's connected, when you've actually got minutes to charge for. Messaging has kind of got a little bit of a different model. It started off where it wasn't even about did it get delivered, it was just did you send me a message? So you've actually got two fundamentally different pricing models, one which is around delivery and completion, the other which is around origination and sending. And I think that creates a huge confusion when you're trying to build applications that are omnichannel. So what happens with these other mechanisms? Some of them subscription-based. So I heard a comment in the last session which was about consistency. Well, have I just identified a major piece of inconsistency in that you're looking at different channels or different modes of operation which have got such different mechanisms that somehow someone has got to overcome that. And I think that's a lot of the job of the people, some of you in the audience, some of us up here, who are acting as the relationship between the user of these services, the enterprises, and the carriers who are charging for these services. Someone has to mediate. Someone has to level out that piece of the playing field and try to make that understandable to an enterprise who doesn't understand any of this stuff. They're not exposed to the minutiae that we are. So I think that's the challenge, this consistency, the diversity in these different charging models.
Yes, sir. Would you agree with what Tim just said?
Thanks. That's a very good question, and I understand about the inconsistencies that Tim's mentioning. I think one way of looking at the complexity in the way we're evolving the CPaaS or the omni-channels is that consumers are getting more choice, but with that choice comes more complexity, especially in methods of delivery, methods of understanding how, which channel works better for which client in terms of whether they have promotional traffic, whether they have transactional. But one thing that we as Telesign have been seeing, additional complexity, and I wish I could say I'm simplifying it, but we have to know where the complexity is coming from. And one of them is that we've heard from more than 90% of our own clients saying some of the complexity around what they see is because the consumers want protections. It's not that they can do it themselves. So we're all, as an industry, as a platform provider, we're all responsible to protect the end consumer. So complexities are evolving, fraud is evolving, and we all have to somehow alleviate that, but the complexity doesn't end there. That's one of the additional factors that everyone has to put into play.
So the messaging industry has been growing, but the complexity has been increasing. I mean, we've seen the sort of renaissance that was brought in by the COVID age, and all the way to the fraud and artificial traffic and the complexities around pricing and commercial models, and the enterprises, the smaller companies not understanding what is available to them. So how do we mitigate those challenges while keeping in mind the ethics behind it, the regulations behind it? I'm going to come to you, Noah, and get your opinion. Is there a way that we can safely and easily, if there is such a thing, with all the complexities, mitigate the challenges around the commercial models?
Well, thank you, Marcia. I think that was a fantastic question, because it really comes into being a designer, as I am. I look at the entire problem and I try and break apart the elements and see if there's a common thread across all of them. And the complexity here is the inability for us to manage identity properly on both ends of the communications. So when you consider that all the problems that we have and the complexities, it's us chasing, it's us creating the scenario that we're trying to solve for symptoms instead of trying to cure the problem. So when you think about the complexities of messaging, it really, if you peel that onion back, it's the complexities of our own identity and what kind of channels we use. Because when you think about messaging traverses private networks, it traverses public networks, and again, it comes into identity, whether it's in an organizational model or in a personal model. So when you start to unravel these complexities, it comes into how do we share better? How do we allow for competition to turn into cooperation? And I think that will start to simplify for those users, because the users are the ones stuck into it. So I think that our job as industry professionals and industry participants is to take as much noise away from the enterprise and the consumers as we can, and try and give them tools and access to things that can mitigate these complexities.
Oh, that's great. Chuck, do you think we can remove the noise around the whole complexity and everything else that's surrounding the messaging ecosystem for the enterprises, the people that are looking at us to provide them a service that works?
It's a great question and great perspectives shared so far, and I will probably bring a slightly different perspective. And Tomia, we're a bit more in the back office, behind the scenes, facilitating pricing, costing, where things will be routed, those types of things. And I related a little bit to how I've watched the complexities of the voice business be handled and evolved and changed over the years. So it requires the business model to really become somewhat mature before you build robust systems around it. And so I think that there's clarity in the messaging business to a degree today, and we've already built solutions around that, but I think it's definitely evolving. It's merging with other types of messaging for sure. And we'll kind of wait and see the market mature more in some of those ways and know better what we need to build behind that. But I think, yes, it can be overcome. Exactly how that's going to happen, I think we'll see a little bit more as it goes, and some people will drive it and some people will react to it, obviously. But I think it's certainly going to be interesting to watch.
Okay, you look like you had something to add to that, Noah.
I think it's just amazing that we can all just sit here and talk about it openly and not think about the competition side of it. We think about solving problems together, and I think that that's the key to any village running properly, is it takes the entire village.
Yeah, that's so true. I would like to get into the side of the smaller businesses and enterprises, our customers, right? The ones that are looking at us to give them a solution. And I'm looking at you, Chandras, and how do you educate the end user to choose wisely?
Thank you, Nasia. I want to add to our fellow panelists' discussion till now. See, when you talk about messaging being more getting complex or all that, that's the one way to look after that. What I feel is we are in a transition as industry. Once message is delivered for any SMB and for any customer, the real work starts after that. The engagement of that particular SMB or that customer, or how much business he generates out of that, is much more important. Speaking in perspective of any SMB, we have different channels for messaging. Like we have telco channel one that is more costly, and when the way MTRs are increasing for many countries across the globe, like if you see average message termination for international used to be 2 cents, like 5-6 years back. Now it has increased to, in some markets, more than 10 cents. So somewhere what I feel is, while you are speaking with any SMB, you need to educate them. You need to know about their target market. You need to know that what channel you need to suggest to them. For example, it's a digital marketing company that is just broadcasting the messages, and where click-through ratio, they don't need like 20-30%. We should go by non-telco way of the termination. If, customers are very loyal to that particular organization, for example, that company is into banking, that company is into very, where messaging is very sensitive, then you need to suggest some telco-based model or termination to that. Overall, what I feel is pricing for any SMB or any organization still is not a roadblock, as long as they are growing their business through these media channels, be it messaging, be it email, be it push notification. So in perspective of any company, when we suggesting them any media channel or all that, our target is what is their target market, what is their segmentation, and what geography they are targeting for that particular business. So this is the way we move forward.
Okay. Yasser, do you think we're overcomplicating things when it comes to commercial models for messaging?
That's a very loaded question.
Well, we're here to answer those types of questions. Otherwise, what's the point?
So, no, thanks, Nasia. It's something important to consider. We all want to be able to know that we're getting the best value out of the channel, so that we can allow for, as an industry, for the messaging industry to thrive and not stall after a certain point. One simplification that hasn't been replicated globally that I see in the Americas market versus internationally is that in the Americas, stability in pricing has been there for years. It allows the enterprises to see or to know and budget for you know, their campaigns or for their you know, underlying clients to get the OTP messaging that they require, or notifications that are being sent. So accessibility in the US market has caused the pricing, I mean, partly because it's a mature market, but other international destinations have opted for slightly more complexity because of domestic versus international, and you know, domestic being the preferred channel for locals in any country they're involved in. But ultimately, it causes a bit of friction that, you know, why is there no standardized model? So in the sense of simplification, it sounds simple enough that there's a domestic versus an international model, but every country is different, every operator thinks differently. That's where I think the complexity is, and regulators don't necessarily work with each other globally. They have different optics in terms of what they're looking to do. Whether, you know, agencies like the MEF, they're helping stamp out fraud. Whether, you know, companies that are offering omni-channels work with such regulators. So the complexity can be simplified, I think. It's just we're not there yet. And, you know, pricing-wise, it needs to be somehow optimized.
Okay, all right. Personally, I have a problem when we say we're not there yet, especially since this industry is at least 20 years old. Surely by now we should be there and beyond there. So, Chuck, you are smiling, so I'm sure you have a lot of things in your mind. So why do you think we haven't reached that pivoting point to satisfy both the operator and the service provider and of course the SMEs and the enterprises when it comes to pricing?
Wow, that's a big question. I'm not sure I have a great answer for that one, but I think right now it's because of the complexity that we just talked about in the previous question. This business is quite complex. If I think about you know, the previous complexities we saw, we deal with things like price and quality parameters, and now we're dealing with the choice parameters of the end consumers or the enterprise. So there's additional complexities involved in the equation that we've gotten, let's say, reasonably good at solving in the past. And now we're just going to put more complexities, more data points, more need for very intelligent analytics and solutions to merge those gaps between all those interested parties. And everybody's got a stake in the game, and everybody's trying to protect their territory to a degree. And so figuring out how to collaborate in a way that everybody can have a piece of the solution and win along the way is it's not easy, and so I think it will take time.
Okay, Tim?
I think I could comment a little on Chuck's comment there, but almost in terms of the movement here, because I think your point there was, here we are with sort of 20 years of a business. How can it be that it's still on the move? And it does still seem to be very much a rebalancing act. If you think in the beginning of the A2P marketplace, the majority of traffic was being delivered by what we now think of as a fraudulent means. It was grey traffic. The MNOs were not charging for that delivery of messaging. Over this 20 years, we've shifted. They've started to put in firewalls. They've recognized the opportunity to monetize. They've flattened out that ecosystem, or where the value add is. Previously, all the value add was in the front end of it, the A2P, and the value for the MNO was actually very small. That has rebalanced, so that's why I sort of talk about it as a changing scene, and that's why I think we're still seeing it move. As you heard in the last session, those of you who were here, there was a little talk about how firewalls have been deployed as a means of monetizing for the MNOs. And I think we're still at the position where that's in the, 80% mark, 70 to 80% mark. That's still not 100%. And also the way those firewalls are being deployed is still quite inconsistent. Some are just a safety throttle, some are just a fraud throttle, some are actually a monetization method. So I think we're going to continue to see this moving. But I've got to say, if you're looking for someone to balance it out, I think it's at that front end. It's, well, a couple of you guys, those who are providing the applications, in being able to normalize what you're seeing between all of these different mechanisms in the back end and provide a little bit of stability to that and protect these enterprise customers from that, which I think is what you've always done. But it is it's a continuously changing game, and I don't expect that to get that much easier. I think it actually continues, and that's our job. That's our value add, to actually make it easy for other people.
I mean, it will be incredible if we'll be able to bring one-size-fits-all solution, which doesn't exist. You know, to simplify how enterprises see the value of messaging that comes through both the technology and the commercial side of the business, because we want them to continue using messaging. That's the ultimate goal in the end of the day, because if they stop using messaging, I mean, it doesn't matter how good the commercial model or how effective the commercial model is. And Chandras, I would like to get an idea of how you guys, Bankai, what kind of use cases that you have that have been successful in keeping the customer happy, both from the commercial side, the customer experience side, that it balances, you know, the scales a little bit.
See, coming to messaging as a channel for marketing, see, still when it comes to open rates, messaging, simple SMS is 97%. When it comes to CTR, click-through ratio, it's somewhere around 19 to 20%. If you compare that with other medias, it's already 3 to 5 times high. Email open rate is somewhere around 25%. So in specific to any customer, like we were in discussion with one of online pharmaceutical company. They were like building that online kind of medical store. Around 1 year back, they came to us, and their all business was either it was through walk-in customer or it was through their website. Once they kind of got that UCaaS platform, they're now 50% business is coming from WhatsApp business. So can you imagine a company, pharmaceutical company that build online medical store or pharmacy, they're 50% business, and they are in 10 cities within India. And they have live customers every day, order somewhere around 50,000, around 1.5 million. They are 50% business coming directly through messaging channel. So what I feel is still messaging has lots of importance for SMBs or be it for enterprises, because what makes SMS unique? First is reach, second is open through ratio, third is analytics part. It's very easy to kind of track and monitor your marketing campaigns when you are doing that through messaging. So what we feel is messaging as a marketing channel is going to survive. Yes, there is some balancing act, as he mentioned that in last 20 years there have been different business models. But if you talk about international messages, still the total number of international messages globally out of the total A2P messages are somewhere around 3 to 5%. So the increase in prices for international messages are affecting only 5 to 7% of the total volume of the message. Domestic-wise, most of the markets are stable. Most of the markets are forward-looking, and I feel that messaging as a marketing channel will keep on be the integral part of all the SMBs and enterprises.
Now, Noah, I would love to get your perspective, because you're coming from a different angle, and you see it both from what is happening. You've been in the messaging industry for a while, but also you're looking at it from a personal data and identity and regulations and ethics and so on and so forth. What are you seeing through all your discussions within the industry when it comes to securing SMS as a business and also creating commercial models that work for everyone?
Well, that's interesting, because listening to the panelists, it's quite interesting. We're all talking about making money, and that's fantastic. Don't get me wrong. Everybody wants to make money. But one of the challenges that I've been seeing, especially in the identity side, is just imagine that the A2P model was so far to the right, out of the scope of people making money at the M&O level, that they swung the pendulum all the way to the left. Well, what does that do? Well, it shows that you can make money at the carrier level, fantastic. But one of the things it missed out on was it started to sacrifice conversational messaging in the process. And people who converse over the channel are the ones who started the channel to become able to be monetized in the first place, right? So it was really consumer adoption of this as a communication channel prior to it becoming a commercialized model. So I think there's real keen lessons to learn from saying, okay, well, we can't just have one type of model for commercialization. We have to expand our minds. So, you know, in the early days of messaging, it was really more Wild West. And if you think about how the Wild West really was conquered, it started with these pioneers, right? And maybe the pioneers weren't so good. Some of them weren't so good, right? And then this thing came along that was driven by the community of users in the pioneering days, saying, listen, we just put our land up, now we want the law coming in. Now we need a little governance coming in. So when it comes to personal identity, that's where that overlap comes in. Because every member of every company, every member of every community, they're all individuals as part of a larger organizational identity model, right? So I think we have to keep a keen eye on how do we identify the personal identity within this entire A to P scope, because we need to start thinking not just about sending messages out, but what are we sending out? So one of the companies I was talking to recently is not just doing AI, they're doing predictive conversational AI, not post-analysis AI. They're trying to figure out emotionally what you want to be conversed in a way that is not like just a business sending you out a message. They want to be much more personalized. So I'm seeing this shift of identity starting to rear its head in a completely different way in messaging, which I find entirely exciting. So
you mentioned conversational predictive AI, and I've been trying so hard not to talk about IoT while we're sitting there and how it will affect the entire ecosystem. I promise you guys I'm not going to take over the session talking about how we can use messaging to enable IoT, but and you also mentioned that in the early days it was the Wild West. Do you think we've gone beyond Wild West, or have we created a new Wild West with everything that's been going on in the industry? We have now a lot of fake traffic, artificial traffic, and I don't want to take too much time because I know it's a different panel that covered fraud and all that business, but all that affects pricing. It affects monetization. And we have part of the community, the companies that they are all about, show me the money. And the rest of us trying to keep it going and ensuring that we're ethical, that everything that we offer is secure, and it brings value to the enterprise. Yasser, my friend, you had some interesting opinions last time we spoke about how we can mitigate all this. So what are your thoughts? Are we still in a new Wild West, or are we able to go beyond it?
So, I think the way to evolve in messaging, at least, one of the things that we all see is that to evolve, we take the complexity, we figure out what the available channels are, we have the options available, and try to simplify. Think of Apple. Apple did something innovative by simplifying what it looks in terms of a consumer experience. As the CPaaS, yes, there are lots of channels. Yes, there are ways of delivering messages. There are multiple types of messages that need to be delivered. So if you have the options available and you can simplify them for the client based on their actual focus, maybe that's the way to look at it, as opposed to lots and lots of channels. You need to use all of them, or multiple channels, but each having They're different price points because they cater to different typologies and methodologies. Banks will not want to, or potentially they might not want to utilize the WhatsApp channel because of concerns around identity and data. But then again, the WhatsApp channel for promotional has clearly risen, and it's becoming very popular. Markets like Brazil, markets like India. And the Meta is going to be monopolizing on that channel where they can. So there will be a rise in channels. There will be a fall in usage in some channels, but the complexity is in figuring out and explaining to the client which works best for them. Maybe that's the way to look at it.
Tim, you would like to add to that?
Yeah, sure, because I think this whole thing about the Wild West, is it that wild? Is that improving? Are the right things being done? And I think, Noah, a point you were making there about combining together business messaging with identity concepts. This whole approach to saying, what are the attributes I need to know of a particular number or a message or a transaction? How do I find those attributes out? And I think that is really moving forward. There are technologies, it's something we're very much involved in, that allow that kind of data to be presented to the end user and allows them to make sensible, informed decisions. That sounded a little marketing-y there, informed decisions. My apologies for that. But anyway, it kind of describes what you're talking about. And I think the second part of that is then, now is it the Wild West or are we just kind of on our own? What we're seeing, though, is the MEF, the I3 Forum, each of the regulators, the FCC here, has actively taken an interest in saying, we've got to sort this out. Now, they haven't got the silver bullet, and I think we all have lived part of this. However, they're collecting a number of bullets together, and as you sort of start applying more and more of these messages and saying back to us as an industry, just take notice. You can't just do messaging. You've got to combine messaging with identity, with trust. When you bring those things together, it's no longer the Wild West. It's now a civilized world. Now, okay, it's a dream, but let's point in the right direction for that nice civilized world where we do, or we are able to make informed decisions. And I think that to me is key.
We are lucky to be living in these times because we have such a great opportunity to experience all this technology, right? So from a personal perspective, I enjoy a good challenge. And I think this is a good challenge and I don't think we will be able to find one way to put together a comprehensive package around commercial models because, as you said, Tim, there are so many channels that are brought together and they have to coexist to provide a cohesive solution for the end user, for the enterprise. And all those come with their inherent challenges and their inherent pricing history, I would say. So it creates a different complexity when it comes to pricing altogether. How do we educate? Chandra's mentioned earlier, gave us a couple examples about educating the end user to make knowing decisions, educated decisions. So, Chuck, how do you guys at Tomia educate your customers to know what they're buying?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think first of all, I'd like to reflect on a couple of the other things that were said just recently by Noah and by Tim. Really triggered some thoughts for me. So Noah's talking about like what I interpreted to ultimately be much richer engagement and the type of content that's going to come over messaging and two-way communication, and who knows how creative those enterprises out there are going to get in what kind of content comes along. And as Tim mentioned, then there's the aspect of creating a trusted environment and be able to know where the message came from and where it's going to, and be able to have confidence in that. And I would say the one thing that I've learned over all of my lifetime, ever since, let's say, college days, is there's always people who work really hard to do the right things ethically and reliably, and then there's people who work equally as hard to basically cheat and take advantage of the system and find other ways to work around that. And I think we experience that in the messaging world today as well. And so I think the education that we will give to our customers has to be on figuring out and working with us on trusted messaging to make sure, pricing, the complexities of the pricing are digested in a very reliable way so they can make good decisions and not open themselves up any more than they absolutely have to, let's say, the fraudsters or the bad guys in the world that are trying to take advantage of them.
Do customers actually digest what we're trying to teach them and tell them? Do they understand what they're dealing with? I will open it up to any of you who would like to tackle this one.
Well, I'd love to add to that because I'll tell you, our business covers a consulting element. Our consulting business has gone through the roof recently because of all this complexity, and they want to know how comfortable they can be made felt, but they also want to know how you can remove the noise from what they're trying to do, which is communicate with their clients. So I think that there's this new kind of approach looking at all communication channels in an equal way, which is very interesting to say because if we talk about those private networks like WhatsApp, they don't have the same security as other channels, and some have less security than their channel, but they're not commercially owned. Where's that data going? Where's your personal data ending up? And I think that there's this this event horizon we're approaching where it's almost like two tectonic plates pressing against each other, and there's going to be this paradigm shift that happens. And I do feel as though we're not going to be looking at communications like we are today, where you're looking at, oh, well, it's a per text message, it's this network of text message, it's this network of voice. It's going to roll up into, just think of how, if anybody has ever watched that show Star Trek, that they just open up a communicator and they say a person's name and they get through. How amazing would that be?
Well, we're not too far away. Willingly or unwillingly, we share our data, and it's everywhere. And if we think about it, that kids now, at a very young age, they get a mobile number, which will stay with them for the rest of their life, most likely. That's their ID, right? That's and in one way that's scary. From the other way, it's exciting because it's going to enable what you said. Open my communicator and say Nasia, and I'm smiling back at you and say, hey, how are you? But and that will bring different complexities when it comes to commercial models, because I would love to talk about these other things because they're exceedingly exciting, but we need to bring it back to the commercial models. And from one hand, we have innovation. And from the other hand, we look at regulation. So, and we need to make sure that we are making money somewhere in there. So what is the fine balance, Chandras, when we're looking at innovation, regulation? Can regulation help us to solve this challenge?
Yeah, definitely. See, when you talk about regulations, as long as they are helping the customers, it's okay. Like if you take an example of India, like we got distributor ledger technology, DLT system, like 3 years back. So in A2P messaging was not regulated. So what our regulator did is any enterprise that wants to send A2P messaging, they need to register one typical sender ID, a particular sender ID with the with our regulatory. So what happened now, the spam decreased by 30%. Like one of panelists was mentioning about digital identity and mobile number being the real identity in the digital ecosystem. So if regulators takes decisions as per the market and as per the market realism, I feel that the balance between regulations and innovation can definitely help the industry.
Fantastic. Yes, sir. Yes, please. What would you like to add?
I would just like to briefly add that regulation is actually what drives all of us towards the solutions that we're producing. So some of the options come about due to regulators wanting some kind of format in which delivery can be made possible. So there's a democratization being done with the evolution of how the omni-channel works. Once they all come together, and to Tim's point, it isn't the Wild West exactly. We are getting to the point of where we see that we can now, okay, all these channels can come together. This is where the regulator steps in and help us, show us the way, okay, data is important for us to preserve in this manner, or propositions for us to educate the clients to watch out for, certain ways of how they want to deliver their messages. And ultimately, we all just need to work hand in hand so that we simplify the process now that we are at the point where we see all the complexities and now bring it down to earth.
Okay, so we are coming to the end of our session. We have like almost, less than 4 minutes or about 4 minutes left. And I would like to give each one of you a magic wand. Imagine that you have a magic wand that can do anything you ask it to. But in this case, I want you to visualize that you're asking it to solve this problem when it comes to commercial models. Yeah, we're training our AI magic wand here. So I will start with you, Chuck. In the 1 minute that you've got, give me the solution. What would you want to? Your ultimate. It doesn't have to be real.
Wow. I'm not sure that I have an ultimate solution in my mind yet. I'm probably a little bit more in the camp of watching the commercial model mature a little bit more and then building more around that, a little less on the bleeding edge of that thought process, I would say. So I'm going to defer that answer to some of the other panelists, probably much more in a good place to answer that.
What about you, Noah? What would your magic wand do?
Well, you are talking to a futurist, so I live there. You want to see the multiple ones I have. So I would say the utopia for me and a magic wand moment would be everyone gets a digital identity certificate just like they get a birth certificate. And in the digital space, identity will rule. So I think that as soon as we can empower, even as businesses, if we can empower users to commercialize their own data and access to their data and to them, the faster we get adoption for completely identified traffic and can reduce or eliminate all these problems that we see.
Fantastic. Tim, I'm giving you half a minute.
Half a minute. Well, first of all, I'll repeat him, because I think the identity point is absolutely key to the future. Whereas he's a futurist, I think I'm a fantasist. So my fantasy is that we see transparency in the pricing models. I think that can make a huge difference to some of these fraudulent practices, traffic inflation practices, and provide that visibility to the user of our services that says, yeah, I do know what I'm paying for.
Yeah. And you, Yasser?
Fantasist, futurist, I'll be the realist. I would say very simply, messaging and trust need to go hand in hand so we can all not worry about a future where we succumb to all sorts of fake accounts or fraud instances. So I think the keyword is trust.
Trust. What about you, Chandras?
See, since you are talking about utopia or all that, what I feel is we should have something like UN of telecom operators, where where all the operators have on a single forum. But again, what I feel is identity is very important.
United Nations of Telecoms.
Yes. So what I feel is once there would be 5G rollouts and identity would be like very uniform across the globe, then I think we can have many of the problems that we are facing would be very less. But there would not be any 100% solution as long as world is as diverse as we are seeing.
In the end of the day, we're all human, and we can only expect to do the best that we can. So I don't know if there's any questions from the audience when it comes to commercial models. We have about 40 seconds left that we can accommodate. I'll take that as a no. In that case, I would like to thank my esteemed panelists, Chuck, Noah, Tim, Chandras, and of course, Yasser. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your candid opinions.